Dr. Nist, I know that your work is centered around infants who are in the NICU. First, can you talk a little bit about exactly what you do? I know you mentioned it earlier, but could you just elaborate on exactly what you do?
Well, I started out as a neonatal intensive care unit nurse, bedside nurse, and loved that. But in that role, I started thinking about what are the things that I'm doing to care for this baby as a nurse? How is that affecting this baby's outcome? So my work is all about the stress experiences of preterm infants in the NICU. And I think about this in two ways. One arm of my research is trying to look at the biological effects of stress exposure in the NICU. These babies experience a lot of heel sticks. They experience things that we think of as benign, like a diaper change. A diaper change for a baby that's this big is a really stressful experience. So these things that they experience over and over and over, how does that change their biology? Because a lot of people will say, well, babies don't remember that experience, and they don't remember it in their brains like we remember experiences, but they remember it in their bodies. So the things that they experience in the NICU as preterm infants changes the way their brains and their bodies function forever. And so I'm looking at what are those changes, how do we quantify those changes, and how do we predict based on those changes what this baby will look like 10, 20, 30 years later. So that's one arm of my research. The other arm of my research is knowing that these experiences change babies, how do we buffer that stress? And we know from previous research that when a child at any age experiences a stressor in their lives, that their parents, having nurturing parents, can be really helpful in buffering that experience and turning what would otherwise be a negative experience into a positive experience. So we know that parents can't be there all the time. They have lives, they have other children, they have jobs, they have to eat, they have to shower, they can't be with their preterm baby 24 hours a day. So we're looking at ways that nurses will never replace parents, but how nurses might be able to buffer those stressful experiences to provide better outcomes. But then we're also looking at ways that we can intervene at the healthcare system level to help parents be there as often as they want to be and as long as they want to be with their babies, because that's really going to be the best stress buffer for those babies.
You've just enlightened me a whole lot, especially just in the day-to-day experience of how a baby might need their basic needs to be managed, but that in doing that could affect them throughout the rest of their lives. And so I think that speaks to some of the misconceptions, and you talked a little bit about it. You also mentioned that nurses should be equipped to manage some of this. So from your research that you're doing, what are some things that healthcare providers and nurses and clinicians can do to be able to support babies in the NICU and their families?
It's really hard. As far as helping parents, I think open communication and culturally competent care is really important. We have to meet that family where they are. And some of that includes just talking to them and asking them, what do you know about preterm birth or what your baby is experiencing? What questions do you have and how can I help you? And unfortunately, that can take a lot of time, and it's time that nurses don't have. So that might be the system level change that we need. We might need to have more nurses caring for these babies. You know, a nurse can't take care of 4 babies. Maybe he or she can only take care of 2 so that they can be with that family more often. So that's part of it. It's also just being attuned to what that baby is experiencing. I think a lot of times we get very task oriented. We think, okay, I got to get in there, I got to draw these labs, I got to change this diaper, I got to do some oral care, check, and we forget that that's a little person. And that baby is a person first and foremost before they're a patient. So being attuned to what the baby is experiencing and trying to put ourselves as best we can in their place, and that's what I'm trying to do through my work, is to help nurses and other providers understand that the NICU isn't just an uncomfortable, unfortunate start to life. It's a traumatic early life experience that forever changes the babies. So that's the other part of the work, is trying to figure out what can we do about it. And we're not quite there yet. We don't know exactly what we can do. We can pay attention to the baby's behavioral cues, although those don't always coordinate with what's happening in their brain. But being more attuned to what the baby is trying to tell us through their body language, and trying to be as gentle as we can, recognizing that, you know, maybe I don't need to do this right now. The baby's sleeping. Maybe I don't need to wake that baby up to change the diaper just because it's time to change the diaper. So things like that.
What I'm hearing from you is that we should have a mindset shift from being transactional to transformational And that, again, I keep saying, echoing this speaks to, I probably will say that 10 more times today. But what made you, or how did you develop this passion? Like, was there something that happened in your life that made you want to get involved in this type of work? Because this is clearly not just a work. It truly is a calling.
I think it's just the development of my interests over time. I started out as a biology major. I had that lab interest that was always planted in me. I tried to ignore it for a long time. Came back into nursing because I wanted my career to be more people focused. Met with the section chief of neonatology, and I said, I really love research, but I love being at the bedside too. He says, well, it sounds like you need to get a PhD. And I said, okay, that's never going to happen. And then 8 years later it did. Exactly. So it was a culmination of all these things. It was my early education. It was working with these babies at the bedside and starting to think about how are the things that I'm doing now affecting them long term. And it just all came together, and I never looked back.
What would be your biggest advice to someone who is doing what you're doing now, and they're saying, okay, they're in college and there might be a biology major and they may want to do something like that, like what you're doing? How would you inspire them? What would you say to them?
Just go for it. It will never be the perfect time. I came back to get my PhD when I had 3 little children. There will never be a perfect time, but when your gut says do it, you jump in. You just jump in and do it. Wholeheartedly.
Jump in and do it.
You do? You
like
just jump
Nike.
in. Absolutely.
I think, were you a second career nurse too, or did you go straight through nursing?
I was straight.
Okay, because like you, I had an undergrad degree in a different field and then went into nursing. So
What was your undergrad degree in?
psychology with a minor in math.
Oh, what? Math?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Well,
I think, but I think that point is like, I think a lot
Yeah.
of us went into nursing because we wanted to make a difference
yes,
and wanted to connect with people. And so it's a great career.
absolutely. And again, care, the root word of character is care. So the fact that each of you cares speaks volumes to your character. So thank you for that. Thank you.